Hello, hello, dear friends. Thank you for coming. Today we have Bill Bengston with us. What a joy, what a joy, joy, joy. Thank you, Bill, for joining us. Thank
Thanks
you.
for the invitation.
Yes, yes. Bill is a living, breathing example of what play mind is to me. So I'm going to introduce you first. William F. Bengston is an emeritus professor of statistics and research methods at St. Joseph's University in New York, and the past president of the Society of Scientific Exploration between 2010 and 22. And it's an international group of scientists who study anomalies. Dr. Bengston has been doing research into anomalous healing for over 40 years and has numerous peer-reviewed academic publications. His memoir, The Energy Cure, is published by Sounds True Publishers. He has also lectured widely in the US, Canada, and Europe. Dr. Benston's research has produced the first successful full cures of transplanted memory cancer and induced sarcomas in mice by energy healing techniques that he helped to develop. He has also investigated assorted correlates to healing such as EEG and fMRI entrainment and geomagnetic micropulsation anomalies in healing space. His current work involves the attempt to reverse engineer healing and reproduce healing without the healer, and to develop therapies that can be scaled. To read more, please see bengstonresearch.com. Yes,
Perfect.
yes, beautiful. Dr. Bengston, now I really want to ask you all of these things, so I'm going to go fast into them, right into the core of this. I wanted to ask you by starting um, with what is skepticism? Your definitions that I love so much. What is it, and how is it related to certainty and clarity? And how does it juxtapose with playfulness, mystery, and a state of awe?
That's a good question. Yeah. Skeptics should be playful. Skeptics should be open. Skeptics should be testing their ideas. Skeptics should be finding out what's right and what's wrong, seeing it if they're right or wrong. I'm an example of a skeptic. I've been doing this, you said 40 years, it's closer to 90. And I'm a skeptic even after all this time because I don't know enough not to be skeptical. So I'm very cautious, I'm very careful, I'm very conservative in my research work because I want to make sure I don't screw up and get it wrong. Skepticism is often misused out there in the world as that means I don't believe or I believe you're wrong, or something like that. But there's a certainty that surrounds skeptics, and they dump on ideas without knowing what they're talking about, frankly, and they dump on ideas without being real skeptics. I'm a skeptic. It doesn't mean I accept or don't accept. It means I'm going to follow the evidence. Most skeptics that I've come across don't follow evidence. They consider skepticism a badge of honor, which really means debunker. And a debunker is someone who believes. I, as a skeptic, don't default to belief. Most people who call themselves skeptics apply belief, but they apply belief to disbelief. So if I have an experiment which shows that you can cure cancerous mice, no. Without looking at the evidence, they already know I'm wrong. Now that's a believer, and a skeptic is generally not a believer. I've spoken to skeptic societies, been invited, and it's kind of fun. You go into an auditorium or a room or wherever you're doing it, and they're all sitting there like this, and they're all clumped up. And I usually begin by insulting them because insulting people is my superpower. And I usually begin by insulting them and saying, "I'm probably the only skeptic in the room." And they go, no, 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 we're the such and such skeptic society. And I say, you're not skeptics. You already know what I haven't yet said is wrong. That's not skepticism. Skepticism means show me what you got and then let's talk about it.
It sounds like being open-minded to me.
It is,
Yes,
but without the illusion that you know the truth. I,
yes,
I've only been doing this for 95 years. I don't know the truth yet, and I certainly haven't uncovered how the world works. So I'm skeptical of claims. I'm skeptical of data or conclusions, and I'm certainly skeptical of people who know the truth. There's the believers come in a couple of different flavors. I mean, it's not really flavors. I've never eaten one. But they come in the flavor is I believe everything is true, and they scare me. I believe everything is wrong, and they scare me. Let's show what you got. Let's show what you got. For example, I've spoken about my mice research in to departments of oncology in medical schools, and they come in being skeptical as they should. Here comes a lunatic who thinks I can do hocus pocus and cure cancer in laboratory animals that have never had a cure. And the reality is that's a crazy claim. And so a skeptic should try to cut my knees out, as I'm doing that and find the flaw in my research. At the end, to departments of oncology, 75 oncologists, I'll get a sustained standing ovation, but not until they've tried to knock me down for hour after hour after hour. And then they go, well, we can't find a flaw. Good job. The people who call themselves skeptics could never get to that point. What they would do is if they see something that bothers them or contradicts the way they think the world works, they close down.
yes,
Real skeptics are a breath of fresh air. I don't find too many. I find believers, and believers are scary to me.
yes. It's good to hear your terminology, the way that you're using these words. Words are just words, right? They're empty without the meanings we put in them. So let's continue because some of our audience might not be familiar with your work, and I'm so happy that they're going to have a taste. So uh, please tell us about healing without the healer. And you talk about how the degree of success also in healing is in proportion to getting out of the way, which is so beautiful. Please tell us, how is healing without healer, and what is getting out of the way in that?
If healing, I mean, at this point, after a little over 100 years doing this stuff, they there are certain things they're not interesting questions anymore. So, for example, does healing happen? That's not an interesting question. If someone calls me up and says, "Here, I'll give you $1 zillion if you'll come to my lab and show me that healing happens," I say, "Get away from me." I have 20 mouse experiments. I have the last one out of the University of Tokyo. I've got them all over the world. I've got. So there are certain questions that aren't interesting. They're fascinating in terms of trying to understand the world, but I don't really understand how healing works, but I can show you that healing works. It doesn't mean everything can be instantly cured. It doesn't mean anything like that, but something significant goes on when we do healing. I can show you that healing doesn't diminish with distance. That's an almost unbelievable thing to say. If healing doesn't diminish with distance, and it doesn't. So if I have a mouse cage here and I put my hands around the mouse cage and I do my hocus pocus and the mice get cured, that's easier for people to accept than if the cage was actually in California. And I'm in New York. And so there's 2,500 miles, 3,000 miles, where it depends in California where you are. And so it's a long distance. It works the same. Now, how does that work? How does healing hit a target 2,500 miles away, hit this target and miss this target? And the answer is, I don't have a clue. I don't have a clue. I can show you that it happens, but theoretically, it really goes at my understanding. It undermines everything I understand about the way the world works. So if you talk about energy healing, for example, it can't be energy healing. It can't be energy. If it's energy, it would diminish with distance. It doesn't diminish at all. And then it hits a target. I mean, how do you aim to California? You know, what do you have to do? And you hit this target and you miss this target. Something we're thinking about this the wrong way. So we start to think about this stuff and we scratch our heads and we go, I don't know what's going on. I mean, and so I've been doing this 110 years. I don't know what's going on. But I know something's going on, and I know distance doesn't matter, and I know healing happens, and I can list a bunch of propositions that I know, but I got a huge list of things I don't know. Now, if healing happens, and I've done a bunch of clinical studies too, if healing happens, it turns out there's an almost inexhaustible supply of people in pain. We're not going to get to them one-on-one. If you can't do something on a larger scale than one-on-one healing, it's cute, it's interesting, the patients may appreciate it, all those kinds of things. But there's a zillion people who have much more need than we're ever going to get to by doing hands-on or healing with intention or whatever you want to call it. And energy healing, whatever you want to call it, we're never going to get to them. So let's assume, just for fun, I train 100 people how to do this. And they each train 100 people how to do this. And they each train 100 people how to do this. We're not even getting close to what's needed. And it's also a hard thing to do. So if a patient comes to you and you're a newbie healer and they have something that's fatal, and the only thing standing between them and death is you, that's not the most comfortable position to be in. Your patient may get cured, but it's going to wear you down. Suddenly 10 people who are dying come and start knocking on your door. That's a heavy burden to put on someone. So while healing happens, and distance doesn't matter, and if we're going to turn this from a non-conventional affair, as I've been doing for 110 years, if it's a non-conventional type of healing, whether it's hands-on or hands near or distant healing or wherever it may be, we have to get that storable and scalable. Storable means I somehow put the healing intention or healing intention is good at anything else. Healing intention into something that can be mass marketed. Because I could easily sell, and by sell I mean convince you to try, healing if I had the ability to distribute a couple of 100 million doses. I'm not going to get to a couple of 100 million doses by teaching somebody next door or treating someone next door. It's too daunting a problem. So the question is, how do you make it widespread? Now we're used to everything being widespread. So batteries. You go, you buy a battery. You have an electric charge in the battery. Imagine what Benjamin Franklin would have thought of that. I mean, it would be a miracle. It would be unbelievable. So he's got a kite on a string and he gets a shock. If you want other people to get a shock, you can't go out there, everybody with a kite and a string. But while we're used to batteries, which we can mass produce in a battery factory, and give them to anybody want a battery, take a battery. That's what I'm trying to do.
Beautiful. Yeah, and is this related? I mean, the way that you came to this is as you talk about resonance bonding. And it's so interesting in this context that we have here also, because we're talking to an audience that has the habit, including this one, of overdoing and overthinking. Overworking, work martyrs, workaholics, and how play mind is the cure, is the way out, let's say. So, and you're talking about the resonant bonding and healing as connection and as love, and the healer getting out of the way. So now we can make this I mean, the receptivity of healing is also in proportion to its being mass produced, is it not?
It depends. It depends. The kind of storage and scaling that I'm talking about, we've got two different research arms. We've been able to store healing in both organic and inorganic material. So organic material, for example, cotton. Organic material, the laboratory organic molecules that are put into a cell culture for food for the cells, in vitro kind of research. There's all sorts of things that we seem to be able to store. We also can store information in inorganic material. So, for example, water. Now, because you can store it, that's a different question of can you scale it? So healing might be storable, but not scalable. And healing might be, if it is scalable, it is storable, but it can be storable without being scalable. So for example, I don't have any with me, cotton. Cotton, it turns out to be a wonderful medium for storage. In other words, if I hold a piece of cotton, so imagine this is a piece of cotton. If I'm holding a piece of cotton and I'm putting my healing intention into it, it turns out cotton's really good at then applying that piece of cotton to a laboratory, to a cell, to a mouse, to a human. It's very, very good at giving you healing. But it turns out it's not easy to scale. So if I walk around holding a piece of cotton and then I stick it in the mail and I ship it to you, you can take that piece of cotton and put it on yourself, and it works. And it works. I don't know if it's as good as a live, but it's probably pretty close. But even then, that's still doing healing one by one by one by one. Here's a piece of cotton, here's a piece of cotton, here's a piece of cotton. And it takes some time to charge the piece of cotton. So it's storable. I'll give you an example of an experiment, not published. This is at Brown University. We take cancer cells and we put a piece of cotton that's been treated, and we have a piece of cotton that's not treated. And we take the cancer cells and we start bringing it closer and closer to the piece of cotton. And the cancer cells in a petri dish will start to genomically change as they get near treated cotton. And it's a reliable effect. So these proteins are folding this way and that way and the other way. But in other words, the cancer recognizes in the cotton that there's something different about this piece of cotton. If you take the cells in a petri dish, and not really, they're in well plates, but if you put the cells in a petri dish and you just bring ordinary cotton over to it, nothing happens. Why would it? But if you've got healing intention in it, the cancer cells recognize it and they start going through genomic changes. But cotton is not particularly scalable. At least I haven't figured out a way to do it. So I've looked at maximum scalability, and maximum scalability is in a recording. So we've taken, this is also done at Brown University, also the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and a number of other places. We take a big Faraday cage. Faraday cage is something that screens out a bunch of electromagnetic signals. So it's like a safe room. It's a quiet room. It's getting rid of all the electromagnetic pollution that we have. What we did is we got three people who know my healing method, and they went inside of a Faraday cage that's 12 feet by 12 feet, and we put in there 38 different detectors. The reason for the 38 detectors is because we have no idea what we're doing. So, so we might as well throw the kitchen sink at it and see what happens. So we had 38 different detectors. So they're measuring this frequency and that frequency and scalar fields and a bunch of stuff. And people are in there charging cotton. That's all they're doing. The detectors are running. And then we take the 38 tracks and we reduce it to a WAV file, put the WAV file into a computer, and we play them to cancer cells. So we go to an incubator and we take this thing which has been recorded. We got cancer cells in an incubator. And what we do is we play inside the incubator with little speakers. We play the recording that we've done in this massive recording reduced to a WAV file. And we play that to cancer cells. And we've gotten in 7 replications, again, I'm very conservative, but in 7 replications, when you play this, and we looked at 167 genes in the cancer cells in the dishes, 68 of them genomically change reliably. So we turn this thing on and the cancer cells start freaking out and flipping around and doing this, and they grow telomere lengths and they increase apoptosis and they do this and they do that. They shouldn't do any of this. But they have 68 out of 167 genes flip in a way that doesn't make sense. 7 replications. Now, think of the possibilities of a recording. So here we have now a technology, and we can externalize the technology and we can think about how do we make it better. So we compared, for example, taking cancer cells and having a human put their hands around the cells, and we compared that in signal strength to something that we have in this recording. And it turns out that the strength of the recording is not as strong as a human intervention. Something significant happens, and we've used it in all sorts of cases, in clinical cases, in experimental cases, and all that stuff. Something happens, but it's not as good as the original, whatever it is we're doing when we charge cotton. So if a person was in dire straits and they said, does it make any difference whether I'm listening to the recording or I want a human treater? At this point, I'd want a human treater. But what if we can tweak, because we're playing with tweaking it, and I got a PhD in signal analysis helping me to tweak it. What if we tweak it so it's as good as a human intervention? I could upload that to the cloud. And now I have unlimited amounts of dosages that anybody with access to the cloud could download and use to cure themselves. That would be kind of fun.
That would be good.
It would be kind of fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say.
So I think that'd be worth doing. And so, let's charge a nickel for a cancer cure. I'll still have more money than I need. And we don't have to have these ridiculous costs to do medical intervention.
How about the water?
The water would be another way to go. So my other research arm, one is in the recording and one is in water. Water, it turns out, may be the best medium for storage. So water is absolutely fabulous. And water, we have some experiments done. We have water, just ordinary tap water, which somebody has held and intended, take what you need, whatever, just We don't know what we're wishing for. Just do good things. And we've taken that and we've diluted and succussed it. Similar to homeopathy, but it's not homeopathy. You're starting just with water. And we're diluting water with water. That makes no sense at all. But we do it anyway, and it matters, and the number of dilutions matters, and the succussion rate matters, and all these things matter. And so we've come up with water that I think, I'm going to say this with a certain caution, and if you don't buy it, it's okay. I think we've come up with some treated water that's as good as a live treatment. It might even be better. So we're getting effects with treated water that seem to be an improvement over hands-on or even distant or human intervention. So we've had, for example, success clinically in conditions, clinical conditions that we have not had much success in with hands-on techniques. The water's doing it. Not always, not all. I'm not claiming a miracle cure, but something at least as interesting as the basic idea of healing is happening with water. Now, that doesn't help in terms of scaling. So this is similar right now to cotton. Now what do you do? Well, I work with some folks in Europe, and we came up with a couple of ideas. I'm going to just call it a gizmo. It's a gizmo that has an input valve for water and an output valve for water. And the input valve goes into this device that has no moving parts, but it infuses the water with the information that's sitting in the center of this device. So we take the water that we've treated, succussed, diluted, and take that water, and it's really not much more than this. We stick it into the gizmo, and out comes water that'll do everything that this will do. It's really interesting. Now, that's still not as scalable as the recording. If I've got the recording, I've got worldwide distribution. But I have enough now in this gizmo. We can make more gizmos. But basically, it's just shooting in and shooting out water, and it's we're calling it informed water, because it's informed with whatever in heaven's name healing is. Now, we've tested this water. We've tested it clinically. I've tested it in humans. We're doing some stuff with hepatitis B right now. We've got a few hundred people with hepatitis B that we're giving this water out of a gizmo. No human has touched it. We have already finished a COVID test going to a hospital that was devoted to serious COVID patients, and no human touched the water. No human did anything. It just came out of this gizmo, and we shipped it to the people who want to do it. And it was double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized. And I have to tell you that we blew out medical intervention. Blew it out of the water. It's startling what we found. But still, I got the problem of scaling. It's not going to be as neat and clean as a recording for the scalability.
So I have 4 questions. First one, please tell us a little bit more about this gizmo. How is the information at the center of it without any human doing any of the modalities?
Well, the human has to produce the thing that you're trying to replicate.
Right. Okay. So there's one sample water. Is
one
that
sample water? So if I had this, I could give you certainly 10 million doses. And by doses,
so from this
what
you
that
put
would
it
mean,
into the gizmo?
it would be drops under the tongue.
Yes.
So you're taking water, drops under the tongue. It's just water. If we look at right now, we're doing studies at the University of Washington on what in heaven's name is happening to this water. So we got some fluoroscope, interesting stuff that something's happening to the water that's not casual. We're just scratching our heads trying to figure out what it is that's happening. So we're doing something to the water. The water in turn does something. We've had 3 clinical studies of about 100 people each with a wide variety of conditions, 2 clinical studies in the States and one in Europe. And the results are, they're hard on me as a skeptic because I just it's too much. It's too much. I'm the origin of it. It's still too much for me. And so
Beautiful, beautiful.
I have a dictum that I spout now, that the more absurd the task, the higher the probability of success. So we've applied this to 300 people with, they have this condition, that condition, the other condition, and I'm talking they've had acute bipolar conditions, they're depressed, they have cancer, they have the 98%, and this is just too much. 98% report some sort of significant improvement in their lives, and they
Yes.
want more. They all want more. What do you
So,
do with that? So we've done it. We've done
yeah.
with tests. We're doing tests right now on what are known as C. elegans worms. And C. elegans worms is the classic model to study longevity. The worms only live about a month. And we put a drop in their food supply. That's it, just a drop in their food supply of this water. And so far, we're increasing their lifespan by 10%.
Wow.
Now, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't think the worms believe. I've never had a skeptical letter from a worm. I don't think the cancer cells believe. I'm sure the mice don't believe. Yet people will say, I don't believe that. And to which I say, I don't either. You'd have to be the village idiot to believe this stuff. It can't be.
Beautiful.
It can't be. It can't be. It just
Yeah. So
works.
please, now I wanna bring in one thing, and then I'll go back to this question. I've heard you say beautifully that conscious mind is not relevant to healing, and so in relation to this, I still want to so much understand what
So
is
do
it
I.
that you're doing
Yeah, so do I.
with the what is, tell us a little bit though about what are you doing in that gizmo? What is in that gizmo what is it doing? Like how are you processing?
The gizmo doesn't matter anymore.
Uh-huh.
The gizmo is a way to take water and put stuff in it, put intention into it. The same way that we held cotton and we went to um, in the Faraday cage, we just, like we were treating a piece of cotton, we were storing it in cotton. The question was how to scale it. Well, we hoped the 38 detectors would scale it.
Yes. And so, but even this is a step to scaling, isn't it? Because you're from this much water, treated water, you're producing a lot more water
Yeah,
through this gizmo, right? And so
yeah,
the intention that you're mentioning, so the water that's treated is in the center of it?
yes.
Yes, I see. Okay. Yes. Just
And
this much
it turns
I
out we can reproduce other stuff too. So it's not just water. So we
understand.
can, I mean, we've tried, we also have experiments done in the Netherlands on tulip factories. So we go to monstrous tulip factories, and we put a couple of drops of water in the water supply of the tulips, and they grow bigger. They don't believe. You can't go up to a tulip and go, I'm a skeptic. It doesn't make any sense. Nor do the tulips come up to us and say we're skeptical. They say, give me more. So we have a formulation, for example, that seems to do really interesting things on plants. Um, and it's a water-based formulation, but what we've changed is the dilution and succussion, and it works more explicitly on plants. Um, and you get the craziest stuff. So we've got experiments in large plant factories. We've also just people take it home and they put little bits, little drops, little this. We give it to people with pets. Put a couple of drops in the water bowls. If you have cats in particular, if you put a couple of drops into, put out two water bowls that they've never done either one, put a couple of drops in this, don't do anything to that, they're going to the drops. Then if you take away the plate, they just pace back and forth like, where's my good water?
Yeah, wow. So yeah, and so this brings me to two other things. It seems related. One of them is the innate biological programming that we have and the placebo effect. Please tell us your take on these things and how it's related.
Well,
And
I think,
I'm sorry, one more thing that I wanna also bring this to. I heard you say depression and one more thing that was more of a bipolar issues, I think you said. So it's not just the physical issues that we're dealing with here. Absolutely not.
no,
And we don't know the difference and how correlated those things are in the first place, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so in terms of the innate biological programming that that is our birthright.
Well, I mean, we do almost everything without thinking about it.
Mhm.
That's good. So we go through life mindlessly, so, and that's good. That's not a put down. So if you learn how to walk, you start as a little kid, you go flop and you go flop and you go flop and you go flop, and then suddenly one day, phase transition, you're running around. You can never not walk again. And you never have to think about walking unless something happens. So I got one of my grandkids, the youngest is two and change. He's running around like a nut job. Now, first, because he got his wings. Now he can just run and run and isn't this exciting? Isn't this fun? Isn't this wonderful? Isn't this? But he had to fall a lot before he got and then let go and then they can walk. The act of walking is incredibly complex. But people do it all the time. And I don't give it a second thought. If you described what's necessary in walking, you'd end up crying in the corner going, I can't do that. I got another grandkid who's 6, riding a bike like a demon. How do you ride a bike? What keeps it up? Turns out very few people know what keeps it up. But you don't care. Because if you get your mind, when you start, you're paying attention and you think it has something to do with balance. It doesn't. But when you're trying and you're paying attention and it's just another skill. Then one day, I don't know, why couldn't I do this yesterday? So almost everything we do is mindless. And our goal in mastering a skill, which could be sports, which could be just repetitive tasks, which could be all sorts of stuff, driving a car, operating any type of machinery, walking around. Uh, Mastery is another way of saying mindless, because I don't have to think about it. Healing is the same way. But there's people who confuse healing with, oh, it's sacred, it's spiritual, shouldn't we be, silent, and shouldn't I meditate? I don't know, meditate if you want to meditate, but don't think it has anything to do with you want. Ride a bike and meditate if you want. It's the same question. Could you meditate and ride a bike? I suspect so. Because you're not in charge with staying up.
Yes. And I thought this interview was going to also be we actually titled it image cycling. So how is your image cycling related to this? And yes, how is your image cycling related to healing?
I don't know. But if you don't image cycle, the healing is very different. And I say that from laboratory work. So, for example, I mean, I have 20 mice experiments with cancer, and we have multiple rooms set up in a given experiment, and we change the conditions in the various rooms. I'll give you one example of one study done at Indiana University Medical School. We cured a bunch of mice, and then we took out the cycling, the image cycling. So we did everything the same except didn't include the image cycling. The mice died. Now that's worth paying attention to. So the image cycling does something. The image cycling matters. And I can tell you that people who have trained with me, who are already expert or experienced in, this method, that method, the other method, they tell me, because I'm not a healer, they tell me, I can just heal. They tell me everything changes when they cycle. I don't know what that means. So I've done a bunch of things in functional MRIs to see if I can find the location of the brain where cycling may happen or healing may happen. I've done an EEG work, I've done EKG work, I've done a bunch of work looking at what happens physiologically to someone when they cycle. And so whether you're the target of cycling or you're the person doing the cycling, something happens in the brain and we get an output like, the neurologist said he's never seen anything like it. But the answer to your question is, I don't know what it's doing and I don't know why it matters, but I've tested whether it matters and it matters.
I want to ask you about my personal experience, very limited experience of image cycling. I can't do it fast, very fast or anything. I do just a little bit. And with that little bit, I experience coming to the fast being complete stop. It's just a state, it's really indescribable. It's not about projecting or wishing or manifesting or anything like that at all. It's just you're already in that space. It has more to do with space somehow. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, so you just cycle and then it comes a point where there's a complete stillness and
There's stillness, or like riding a bike, you don't think about it anymore. So right now I'm cycling.
yeah.
As we've been talking, I've been cycling. Why waste the time? So as we've been talking, I've been cycling, but it doesn't detract, see, I'm gesturing now. That doesn't
Yeah.
detract from me talking. I can't, I don't say, hold on 1 second, I have to wave my hands. Okay, now I can talk again. In the beginning, that's the case because you're trying to learn how to ride the bike for the first time.
Right.
You're falling, and I'm not sure how much speed matters, but we've had enough anecdote. We've had tons of anecdote that show that people who don't feel, certainly they don't feel proficient, they just took a workshop or they listened to the CDs or however they learned how to cycle, and they go, is this right? This can't be, it has to be, and they try to make it complicated. And I say, shut up and just do it and see what happens. So we've got people who have just gone out and gotten cancerous dogs and done hocus pocus and image cycled, and the dogs get fixed. That's interesting. They try it on a person, they get fixed. That's interesting. It also scares a lot of people.
How so?
They start flopping on the floor. This can't be true. This can't be. What does it mean now? Do I have to go heal? Do I, and they get all bent out of shape.
Yeah. How would you talk to our audience, the overdoer, overthinking, maybe not at all familiar in the least with image cycling? And I would so much like it to be accessible, and to try because it's so surprising and it's immensely playful, and then you end up with everything that you want. It's already right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cycling is not a healing technique. It just happens that if you cycle and you heal, your healing will change. But there's a boatload of people out there who just use cycling because it feels good, or it brings them peace, or they get what they want, or but they're not going to do, hocus pocus and go out trying to heal stuff. Um, the stuff is all public. So if you go to bengstonresearch.com, there are descriptions of the method. There's papers written about the method. It's in publications. I have a workshop coming up in a couple of weeks. If you want to take a workshop, and you'd find that on the website if you're interested. You can buy the method by downloading it. I'm making this up. I think it's from Sounds True.
Yes, it is.
So I think
That's how I did it.
you can download something called Hands-On Healing, a training course in the energy cure. And there have been people around the world who have taken the CDs. I don't think they're CDs anymore, but have taken the CDs and done it by themselves at their own pace. And then they try
That's how I
something,
did it.
and then they send me hate mail. They send me hate mail because A, it's too hard, I don't want to do this, or B, it's doing exactly what you said. How is this possible? So a lot of people run when it works, just as a lot of healees, the people who need the healing, run when it works.
Yeah.
Most common response I know to healing is anger.
Mhm. Makes sense.
Yeah, it
Makes
did
sense.
to me because
Yeah.
didn't
It's
to me.
just not being, yeah. I mean, it doesn't make sense in the good sense. Yeah, but it does. I've been there. I've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just, but not with the healing though. Yeah, it's different. Yeah. How about I would like we have enough, no time really. Either with something you'd like to close with, or I have many more questions and I could ask you and then you could take it or leave with what you want to close.
Well, I didn't answer your question on placebo.
No, would you like to do
Placebos,
that?
placebos are pretty interesting.
Hmm.
People think it's psychological. I don't. I think it's a bonding of spatially separate groups. So if I take, let's say, let's put it in terms that everybody will get. If I'm testing a drug, I randomly split the people taking the drug into people taking the drug and people taking a placebo. And then I see what happens at the end. Did the treated pill, whatever it might be, produce a different results in the placebo? And the answer is almost always yes, that there's an overlap. Sometimes it's a very strong overlap. And people go, look at the power of the mind. I don't think it's the mind. I think it's an actual physical linking. In the same way that I think healing is a linking. So I have a healee that I want to help. I think we have a bond, which I don't think, I know we have a bond. I know our brains go into resonance, and I have that published in a peer-reviewed journal. Our brains go into resonance so that if we jiggle on one side, we're also jiggling over here. And so placebos, I get placebo effects in mice. You're not supposed to. If it's psychological, I don't know the psychology that a mouse uses. I get placebo effects in cells. I get placebo effects in placebos. So in one study, we got the FDA to return a whole bunch of placebos that they had made for a particular experiment. And I gave them to two biologists, didn't tell them what I was doing, said, examine these for whatever you can do. And they both came back and said, the stuff is chemically active. There's nothing in it at all. It was empty pills. But they had been linked energetically, using that loosely, linked energetically to some pills that were active. That linkage is the source of the placebo effect. It's an actual physical linkage. So the question becomes, how do you bond and how do you unbond? How do you make a connection? How do you break a connection? And you could use the same kind of problem in anything. So, I mean, people talk in terms of entanglement and quantumness and all that. You don't need it. If I'm entangled, it's a one-way street. If I'm resonantly bonded, it's a two-way street. So on Monday, you love your dog. And on Tuesday, you hate your dog. What changed? It's the same dog. But the bond, your audience can feel a bond to a human, to a pet, to a plant, to a book, to an idea, and you can also unbond. I don't know the rules of bonding and unbonding, but I suspect they're the same in healing as in placebos, as in a variety of just ordinary things that we take for granted. So we take for granted most things, and so we are expert in them because we're mindless. Healing, sufficiently mindless, will do the same thing. Placebos, if we can bond these mice to these mice, and we cure these mice will also be cured.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the invitation. Sorry for talking so much.
No, please. I wish we had, I hope we can have more time again.
Sure.
Yes. Thank you. Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
everyone.